In the quiet annals of legal history, some stories lie dormant, mere footnotes of precedent and procedure. Others, however, erupt with the force of a primal scream, shaking the very foundations of society's understanding of justice, grief, and revenge. They force us to stare into the abyss where the cold letter of the law collides with the white-hot intensity of human suffering. This is one of those stories. It begins with the simple, universal image of a mother combing her little girl's hair, a moment of love suspended in the morning light. But it ends in a sterile courtroom, not with a lawyer's closing argument, but with the deafening roar of a handgun. This is the story of Marianne Bachmeier, a woman who, in the eyes of many, ceased to be a mere plaintiff and became judge, jury, and executioner in a single desperate act. We invite you to step beyond the headlines and into the heart of a tragedy that questioned everything we thought we knew about the line between a broken victim and a determined vigilante. What happens when a mother's love is pushed past its breaking point? And when the system designed to deliver justice fails, who, if anyone, has the right to take its place? Every morning in Lübeck, a historic city on Germany's Baltic coast, the day began with a ritual of simple, profound love. Marianne Bachmeier would sit on the edge of her 7-year-old daughter's bed, brush in hand, and gently work through the tangles in Anna's fine, blonde hair. Anna, a child with eyes that held the mischievous sparkle of a sunbeam, would chatter endlessly about her dreams, her friends, and the small, important dramas of a 7-year-old's world. Her laughter was the soundtrack to their small apartment, a sound that filled the cracks in Marianne's own difficult past and gave her life a singular, unwavering purpose. Marianne Bachmeier was not a woman who had known an easy life. Born into the turbulent post-war era, her youth was marked by rebellion and hardship. She had left her family home at a young age, determined to carve out an existence on her own terms. Her life was a tapestry of transient jobs, fleeting relationships, and the tough resilience of someone who had learned early on that survival was a solitary battle. She owned and managed a small pub, the Tip's Eck, a cozy, smoke-filled haven for locals, where she worked long, grueling hours. Before Anna, Marianne had other children, born from relationships that had crumbled, children she had felt unable to raise and had given up for adoption. But Anna was different. Anna was the child she kept, the anchor that steadied her tumultuous life. In Anna, Marianne saw not just a daughter, but a chance at redemption, a living, breathing symbol of hope, and a future she was determined to make bright. Their life was modest, circumscribed by the tight budget of a single working mother, but it was rich in affection. It was a life built on small moments, shared breakfasts of toast and jam, the frantic rush of school preparations, lazy afternoons, spent watching cartoons, and the comforting weight of Anna snuggled beside her at bedtime. For Marianne, Anna was the sun around which her entire universe revolved. The morning of May 5th, 1980, began like any other, but with a small discordant. Note, it was a Monday, and Anna, for reasons known only to a 7-year-old's heart, did not want to go to school. A minor argument ensued, the kind of fleeting disagreement that happens in every family. Anna was upset. Marianne, perhaps tired from a long weekend of work at the pub and frustrated by the morning standoff, was firm, with tears welling in her eyes. Anna grabbed her small school bag, gave her mother a final unhappy look, and walked out the door. Marianne watched her go, likely assuming, as any parent would, that the storm would pass and they would make up that evening. She could never have imagined that this fleeting image of her daughter Small, retreating back, would be the last she would ever see of her alive Dot as the hours of the school day ticked by. A strange quiet settled over the apartment. When the afternoon came and went with no sign of Anna returning, a tiny, cold seed of unease began to sprout in Marianne's chest. This was unusual. Even after a disagreement, Anna would always come home. Marianne started the familiar routine of a worried parent. She called Anna's school, only to be told that Anna had never arrived that morning. The seed of unease instantly blossomed into a chilling vine of dread that wrapped itself around her heart. She called Anna's friends, their parents, her own relatives. No one had seen her. With each phone call, the world seemed to shrink, the air in the room growing thinner, harder to breathe. By early evening, panic had fully set in. Marianne contacted the Lübeck police and reported her daughter missing. The initial response was calm, professional, and procedural. A description was taken. A report was filed. Perhaps she had run off to a friend's house to cool down. Perhaps she had decided to visit her grandmother. But Marianne's maternal intuition screamed a different, terrifying truth. A mother knows her child's rhythms, her habits, her very soul. And the silence that had replaced Anna's laughter was not the silence of a sulking child. It was a profound, unnatural void. The days that followed blurred into a living nightmare. Marianne barely ate or slept. She sat by the phone, her body rigid with a hope that was becoming more painful with every passing hour. The community rallied. Flyers with Anna's smiling face were printed and plastered on lampposts, in shop windows, and at bus stops. Volunteers organized search parties, combing through local parks, abandoned buildings, and the wooded areas on the outskirts of the city. The local news picked up the story, and Anna's face became a familiar, haunting image across northern Germany. For Marianne, the world outside her window became a torment. Every blonde-haired child she saw from a distance sent a jolt of false hope through her system, followed by a crushing wave of despair when she realized it wasn't Hannah. She replayed the morning of May 5th in her mind 1,000 times, torturing herself with what-ifs. What if she hadn't been so firm? What if she had just let her stay home? The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on her, suffocating her. In the deepest, most terrified corners of her heart, she felt a certainty that she couldn't dare to speak aloud, a truth that a mother should never have to confront. Her little girl was not coming home. The silence in the apartment was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a presence, a heavy, suffocating entity that echoed the emptiness that had begun to consume her from the inside out. While Marianne Bachmeier was trapped in a hell of uncertainty, the grim reality of her daughter's fate was locked away in the mind of a man who lived just a short distance away. Klaus Grabowski, a 35-year-old butcher, was a seemingly unremarkable figure in the community. He was quiet, kept to himself, and was known to be engaged. But beneath this mundane facade lurked a dark and predatory history. Grabowski was a convicted child sex offender. He had previously served time for assaulting 2 young girls, a history that the legal and psychiatric systems had attempted to manage. He had been subjected to psychiatric treatment and had voluntarily undergone chemical castration, a hormone therapy designed to suppress his deviant urges. However, upon his release, he had stopped the treatment, and the monster within him had reawakened, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity. On that fateful morning of May 5th, as Anna Bachmeier walked away from her home, upset and aimless, her path tragically intersected with Grabowski's. He saw her, a small, vulnerable figure, and saw his opportunity. With a disarming smile and a gentle voice, he lured her to his apartment, promising her kittens to play with. For a child, especially one feeling sad and looking for a distraction, the offer was irresistible. Once inside his apartment, the door locked behind them. Anna's world transformed from a place of childhood innocence into one of unimaginable terror. For hours, Grabowski kept her captive. The precise details of what happened in that apartment remain locked away in the horror of the event. But what is known is that Anna fought back. She was a spirited child, and she did not submit quietly. This resistance triggered Grabowski's ultimate fear. It wasn't a fear of his own monstrous actions, nor was it a flicker of conscience. It was the pathetic, self-serving fear of being caught. In his twisted mind, a simple calculation formed. If Anna left, she would tell her mother what had happened. If she told her mother, the police would be called. If the police were called, he would undoubtedly be sent back to prison, this time for a much longer sentence. His freedom, his mundane life, was worth more to him than the life of the child. Whimpering in his living room, driven by this craven fear, he wrapped his butcher's hands around Anna's small neck and strangled her until she was silent forever. The crime committed, Grabowski's next actions were a chilling blend of panic and cold practicality. He needed to dispose of the body. He forced his fiancée, a woman held captive by his control and her own fear, to help him. Together, they took Anna's small, lifeless body, folded it into a large cardboard box, and sealed it shut. Under the cover of darkness, they transported the box to the banks of a nearby canal, a quiet, overlooked spot on the edge of town, and left it amidst the reeds and refuse. Grabowski believed he had erased his crime. He went back to his life, to his job, to his fiancée, as if nothing had happened. But secrets born of such evil rarely stay buried. Grabowski's fiancée was crumbling under the weight of her complicity. Tormented by guilt and terror, she confessed to her mother, who immediately contacted the police. The information was precise. The police descended on the canal bank, and there they found the cardboard box. When they opened it, their professional composure was shattered. Inside lay the body of 7-year-old Anna Bachmeier. The search was over. The nightmare had become reality. The discovery sent a shockwave through Germany. The story of the girl in the box dominated the news. The investigation swiftly led to Klaus Grabowski. He was arrested, and during his interrogation, he confessed, with a chilling lack of emotion. He recounted the events, from luring Anna to his apartment to the final fatal act. When asked why he killed her, he gave the answer that would seal his fate and ignite a fire of rage in a mother's heart. He didn't speak of remorse or a loss of control. He spoke only of himself. "She told me she was going to tell her mother what I did," he stated calmly. "I was afraid I would have to go back to prison." When Marianne Bachmeier was informed of the arrest and the details of Grabowski's confession, something inside her broke. The all-consuming grief that had hollowed her out for days began to mix with a new, terrifyingly potent emotion, pure, unadulterated rage. Her daughter, her Anna, her entire world, had not been killed in a moment of passion or madness. She had been extinguished as a matter of convenience. Her life had been weighed against a predator's fear of incarceration and had been found wanting. The German justice system would now take over. There would be a trial, lawyers, evidence, and a verdict. But for Marianne, the system had already failed. It had failed when it released this man back into society. It had failed to protect her daughter. As she sat in her silent, empty apartment, clutching one of Anna's small toys, a cold, hard certainty began to form in her mind. The law would have its day in court, but so would she. Justice would be served, but it would not be the measured, dispassionate justice of the state. It would be the absolute, ferocious justice of a mother. Asterisk. The trial of Klaus Grabowski was scheduled for March 6, 1981, at the district court in Lübeck. The 10 months leading up to it had been an agonizing period of legal maneuvering and public debate. But for Marianne Bachmeier, it was a time of quiet internal transformation. Her grief had not lessened. It had crystallized. It had cooled from a chaotic fire into a sharp, focused point of ice. She attended every preliminary hearing, sitting silently in the gallery, her face a stoic mask that betrayed none of the turmoil within. She listened as lawyers dissected the life and death of her daughter, reducing the vibrant, laughing child she knew into a set of legal arguments and forensic reports. She watched Klaus Grabowski, the man who had stolen her future, as he sat, with his lawyers appearing bored, sometimes even insolent. She saw no remorse in his eyes, only a detached self-interest. And with every passing day, the conviction that the legal system was incapable of delivering true justice grew stronger. On the morning of March 6th, Marianne woke up early. There was a deliberate calm to her movements as she prepared for the day. She chose her outfit with care, simple black trousers and a plain blouse. It was the attire of a woman in mourning, but also one on a mission. She picked up her small black handbag. Inside, nestled between a handkerchief, a notepad, and a file of documents, was a Beretta 70 pistol, a .22 caliber semi-automatic. She had acquired the weapon and had been practicing with it at a local shooting range. This was not an impulsive act. It was the culmination of a meticulously planned resolution. She arrived at the courthouse early. The building was already buzzing with a tense energy. Journalists, photographers, and members of the public crowded the hallways, eager to witness the trial that had captivated the nation. As Marianne approached the security checkpoint, her heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained controlled. A female guard asked to look inside her bag. Marianne offered a polite, disarming smile and opened it. The guard gave the contents a cursory glance. The gun, cleverly concealed among the ordinary items of a woman's purse, went unnoticed. It was a fatal oversight, a small crack in the system's armor through which a mother's vengeance would soon. Poor Marianne entered the courtroom and took a seat in the third row, directly behind the prosecution's bench. The room was heavy with a solemn silence. The high ceilings and dark wood paneling seemed to absorb all sound, creating a feeling of oppressive gravity. The defendant's chair was empty. The judges had not yet entered. Marianne looked around at the faces in the room, lawyers in there. Black robes, court officials shuffling papers, journalists with their notebooks poised. To her, they were all part of a detached, sterile process, a machine that was about to process her daughter's memory with cold indifference. Then, a side door opened, and 2 police officers escorted Klaus Grabowski into the room. He was a man of medium height, with a fleshy face and nondescript features. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He did not look at the gallery. He shuffled towards his seat, his gaze fixed on the floor. But as he passed Marianne's row, their eyes met. For a fraction of a second. In that instant, for Marianne Bachmeier, time stopped. The low hum of the courtroom faded away. The faces around her blurred into an indistinct background. All that existed was her, the man who had murdered her child, and the cold, heavy weight. In her handbag, her movements were fluid, almost unnaturally calm. She did not shout. She did not issue a warning. She did not hesitate. Her hand dipped into her bag, the fingers closing around the familiar grip of the Beretta. She pulled it out, raised it, and aimed it at Grabowski's back as he was being led to his seat. Then she pulled the trigger. The first shot was a deafening crack that shattered the courtroom's solemnity. It was followed by another, and another, and another. In total, she fired 8 rounds in rapid succession. The courtroom erupted into pure chaos. People screamed, diving under benches for cover. Police officers shouted, drawing their own weapons, unsure of where the threat was coming from. Grabowski's body jerked violently with the impact of the bullets. He stumbled forward, a look of shocked disbelief on his face, before collapsing onto the floor in a heap. 7 of the 8 bullets had found their marked dot as Grabowski lay dying on the courtroom floor. Police officers swarmed Marianne. They wrestled the still-smoking pistol from her hand, but she offered no resistance. She simply sat back down on the bench, her body as still as a statue. She did not cry. She did not try to flee. She just stared at the body of the man she had just killed, her face completely devoid of expression. The mission was complete. In the eyes of the law, she had just become a murderer. But in her own heart, and in the hearts of many who would soon hear her story, she had just delivered the only verdict that mattered. She had made the world hear her daughter's silenced voice, not with a whisper of grief, but with the roar of a gun. She was led out of the courthouse in handcuffs, a phalanx of cameras flashing in her face. Her blank stare captured in an image that would become an iconic and deeply controversial symbol of vigilante justice. The gunshots that echoed through the Lübeck courtroom on March 6, 1981, did more than just end the life of Klaus Grabowski. They mortally wounded the public's faith in the German justice system. The act was so audacious, so raw, and so public that it instantly transcended a simple act of revenge. It became a national event, a conversation piece in every home, pub, and workplace across the country. Marianne Bachmeier was immediately taken into custody, charged with premeditated murder. As police escorted her from the courthouse, a media circus ensued. Her image was splashed across the front page of every newspaper, her face a blank canvas onto which a divided nation projected its own fears, frustrations, and fantasies about justice. The German public was profoundly split. On one side, legal purists and government officials condemned her actions as an attack on the rule of law itself. They argued that no matter how heinous the crime against her daughter, taking the law into one's own hands was a descent into anarchy, a dangerous precedent that could not be tolerated. They labeled her a cold-blooded killer who had exploited her grief to commit a calculated murder. On the other side, a massive wave of public sympathy rose in her defense. For millions, particularly women and mothers, Marianne was not a killer. She was a hero. She was seen as a modern-day Judith, an avenging angel who had done what the state was perceived as unwilling or unable to do: deliver a fitting punishment to a monster. Thousands of letters of support flooded the prison where she was held. Women's groups organized demonstrations outside the courthouse, holding signs with slogans like, "I understand, Marianne, and we would have done the same." She became a powerful, albeit reluctant, symbol for all those who felt the justice system was too lenient, too bureaucratic, and too detached from the visceral reality of violent crime. Her own trial became one of the most sensational legal dramas in modern German history. The prosecution built its case on the evidence of premeditation. They pointed to the fact that she had purchased the Beretta pistol well in advance and had been practicing at a shooting range. They argued that smuggling the weapon into the courthouse was proof of a carefully laid plan. Her calm demeanor before and immediately after the shooting, they claimed, was not the sign of a person overwhelmed by emotion, but of someone with ice in their veins executing a plan. Marianne's defense team, led by a savvy lawyer who understood the power of public opinion, countered with a narrative of diminished responsibility. They argued that Marianne was not a cold-blooded killer, but a grieving mother suffering from profound post-traumatic stress. They brought in a battery of psychologists and psychiatrists who testified about the psychological state of a parent who has lost a child in such a brutal manner. They spoke of affective shock, a state where grief and trauma can overwhelm rational thought, leading to impulsive, uncontrollable actions. Her lawyer painted a picture of a woman broken by an inept justice system that had allowed her daughter's killer to walk free once before. The act of shooting Grabowski, he argued, was not a planned execution, but the final, desperate cry of a mother's soul, a convulsive reaction triggered by the sight of the unrepentant man who had destroyed her life. After months of testimony, legal arguments, and intense media scrutiny, the court delivered its verdict. In a landmark decision, that attempted to navigate the treacherous waters between law and human emotion. The judges found Marianne Bachmeier guilty, but not of murder. They rejected the prosecution's claim of a cold, calculated execution. Instead, they convicted her of the lesser charge of manslaughter and illegal possession of a firearm. The court acknowledged the extraordinary mitigating circumstances of her case, accepting that her actions were driven by a complex and overwhelming emotional state. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison. When the verdict was announced, a quiet fell over the packed courtroom. Marianne, dressed in black, simply bowed her head. There was no sign of relief, nor of protest. For her, the legal outcome was a secondary matter. Her real sentence had been handed down the day her daughter's body was found. A life sentence to be served in the silent, empty rooms of her apartment. A punishment of memory and loss that no court could ever impose or commute. Marianne Bachmeier ultimately served only 3 years of her sentence and was released on parole in 1985. She sought to escape the relentless media spotlight and the status of a folk hero that had been thrust upon her. She moved abroad, first to Nigeria and then to Palermo, Sicily, where she married and tried to build a new, quiet life. But the ghost of Anna and the specter of what she had done never left her. The grief was a constant companion, a shadow that followed her even under the warm Mediterranean sun. In 1996, after being diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer, Marianne returned to Germany. She gave a final, poignant interview to a journalist, ensuring her side of the story was told one last time. She passed away on September 17, 1996, at the age of 46. Her final wish was to be buried in the same cemetery as Anna. A mother rejoining her child at last dock even today, her story continues to be debated. Was she a grieving mother who snapped? Or a calculating vigilante who planned her revenge? Was her act a cry for justice or an assault upon it? The story of Marianne Bachmeier leaves us with no easy answers. It forces us to question the very nature of justice, the limits of human endurance, and the terrifying, powerful boundary between grief and rage. Where does the line between a victim's pain and a perpetrator's rights begin and end? Was Marianne Bachmeier right? Or was what happened in that courtroom something else entirely, an event beyond judgment, a raw and human tragedy that the law could never truly contain? In this dark and complex story, the answers lie with you.